Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. Just when a ceasefire deal appeared to be within reach, new obstacles have emerged in negotiations between the U.S. and Iran. U.S. President Donald Trump has reportedly held back the final approval of a draft peace memorandum demanding further concessions from Tehran and tightening U.S. conditions on Iran's nuclear activities. Tehran, meanwhile, says it will respond with its own revised proposal and is openly preparing for the possibility of no agreement at all. Adding to the uncertainty, reports suggest divisions inside Iran's leadership may be widening as hardliners and moderates clash over the country's future course. So how serious are the remaining gaps, and what are the chances of a breakthrough? For more on this, we are joined by Christophe Godin, Professor of Political Science at Kookmin University. A big welcome, Professor.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
And also joining us is Seung-Hoon Baek, researcher at the Institute of Middle East Studies. Good to see you again.
Thank you for having me to your show.
So let's start our discussion first with Professor Godin. So President Trump, he has held off on approving the proposed ceasefire MOU, saying any deal must meet U.S. red lines. Why do you think he delayed approval? And is this about unresolved issues in the deal itself or political pressure at home?
In fact, I'm not sure anybody knows what these red lines are. When President Trump launched these airstrikes on Iran, the expectation was that the Iranian regime would collapse within days or weeks. What we see now is that no matter how unpopular this regime is in Iran, it's still able to secure a very strong stronghold over the army, of our military forces. So as no coup is in view in Iran, no reasonable regime change can be expected within the next few weeks. The Trump administration has nothing to brag about. So right now, Trump cannot basically sign. He cannot go back to his voters, to his viewers. I was about to say, without something he can brag about, and Iran cannot yield either. So for the moment, we are on a deadlock, basically, and all of it mostly because this operation was launched without any proper preparation from the Trump administration.
Right, and as a result of that, Trump may be trying to strengthen his leverage right now. And also, one of the biggest sticking points remains Iran's nuclear program. Dr. Baek, the U.S., it wants Iran to give up its enriched uranium, while Tehran rejects even transferring it abroad. Is there any room for compromise?
Yes, there's still room for compromise, but it is very narrow space. If that is the true, that both the narrative of both sides are true. The issue is not simply where Iran enrichment uranium will be stored. It is about sovereignty, deterrence, and political survival. So from Washington's perspective, Iran's stockpile of highly enrichment uranium, which is 60% enriched uranium of 60%, is the most dangerous remaining pathway to a nuclear weapon. So even if some of Iran enrichment facility have been damaged, the material itself still matters. So the United States wants that uranium either removed, destroyed, diluted, or placed under a verification regime that makes weaponization impossible. But from Tehran's perspective, giving up that material, especially handling it directly to United States, would look like a capitulation. It would also weaken Iran's remaining deterrence value after months of military pressure. So Iran is trying to separate two ideas. It may say it does not seek nuclear weapons, they kind of told Wang Yi at when they're meeting at China, but it does not want to surrender what it called its nuclear right. So the possible compromise would be package formula. So part of the uranium could be diluted inside Iran under international supervision. Another part could be sealed under IAEA monitoring. A smaller portion could be transferred to a third country such as Russia, but not in a way that looks like Iran is handing it over to Washington. So Russia, Oman, Qatar, or another neutral custodian could be discussed, although that would raise serious trust concern for the U.S. and Israel. So diplomatic formula would have to be satisfied two different narratives. The U.S. need to say Iran's pathway to the bomb has been blocked. Iran needs to say we did not surrender our sovereignty. So if both sides can live with this ambiguity, a compromise is still possible. But if Washington insists on full removal of Tehran, and Tehran insists on keeping everything untouched, then even if the MOU is signed, the nuclear negotiation will remain extremely fragile.
So it really suggests that the nuclear issue remains one of the toughest obstacles to any agreement right now. So, Dr. Beck, another key dispute is the Strait of Hormuz. We're aware the U.S. wants unrestricted access, while Iran insists on keeping control and collecting transit fees. Why is this issue so important for Tehran?
So Iran is holding firmly to the Hormuz issues because the strait is not just a waterway for Tehran. It is its strongest strategic leverage right now. Militarily, Iran knows that it cannot match the United States in conventional naval power, but it can impose costs through mines, drones, missile boats, submarines, and selective disruption. So control over Strait of Hormuz allows Iran to convert geographic vulnerability into strategic leverage. Economically, the logic is also clear. Iran has been under heavy sanction, and its oil export has been disrupted, and its currency and domestic economy are under severe pressure. So a transit fee system, or so-called strait authority, would allow Iran to create a new revenue stream and, more importantly, a new bargaining instrument. Although Iran is not fully aware that fully sure that they're going to get the revenues through so-called like transit fee system, but they know it is only bargaining chip that could get economic incentives. So even if the actual fee are not the main sources of income, the political act of collecting or authorizing transit gives Iran a claim to regulatory authority of the strait, which later, if they abandon, okay, we're not going to take the transit fee, but they could like demand for the substitute. So there is also a sovereignty dimension. Iran does not want the post-war order to be written as Iran reopened the strait because the U.S. forced it to. So instead, Tehran wants to say the strait is open because Iran, as a regional power, managed it. So that differences matter greatly for Iran domestic politics. So because of this matters, Iran is trying to keep holding the powers, authorities over the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, Dr. Beck, thank you so much for this very clear explanation on that. Now, shifting gears, Washington has expanded sanctions and banned any dealings related to transit fees through the Strait of Hormuz. Professor Godang, how effective are these measures likely to be?
Well, first, they can be expected to be highly effective because Washington is in capacity to block the Strait of Hormuz, and they already are. In fact, long story short, what Dr. Peck explained like a minute ago is that the Strait of Hormuz, blocking this strait, is the only leverage that Iran is having for the time being. But on the other hand, obviously, you understand that there is no way for the Trump administration to accept Iran turning this strait into some sort of stream of revenue. Trump cannot accept that because in this way, it will look like a defeat that will go obviously against the narrative that the Trump administration is trying to push for. So the way I see it, things are easier than they may look. What is happening now is that Iran is trying to use the only leverage they have to force the U.S. to come to some kind of agreement. Now, from the U.S. point of view, it is obvious that America is trying to leave this battlefield as fast as possible, but with something they can brag about. What Dr. Peck explained very skillfully like a few minutes ago is that no matter how convoluted the agreement will will end up to be. In the end, it is just about finding a way for both parties, Iran and America, for both of them to be able to claim they won, basically. Both of them want this conflict to end, but none of them can look like they've been capitulating. It's basically a deadlock we are facing now, and they just need to find a diplomatic narrative to get out of this mess. In the end, the situation is not as complex as it seems. What happened is that the Trump administration got involved into a mess without knowing how to get out of it. It is relatively simple.
Right. So it seems both sides are really thinking about domestic politics as well. But when we turn back to diplomacy, Iran says it will submit a revised version of the ceasefire MOU while also preparing for a no-deal scenario. So what changes do you expect Tehran to propose, and how likely is a actual breakthrough, Dr. Beck?
I mean, a breakthrough is still realistic, but only if both sides accept a phase and reciprocal structures. I mean, Iran's step-for-step position is not new. It reflects a deep distrust of United States, especially after the collapse of JCPOA and current warfare. So, I mean, Tehran does not want to make nuclear or Hormuz concession first, only to receive vague promises of sanction relief later. So the U.S. position is opposite. But the U.S. position is the opposite. Washington does not want to give major sanction relief or unfreeze its asset before Iran makes verifiable moves on uranium, mines, and navigation. Because now even Trump's side and even the cabinet members of the first Trump term, like Bolton and Pompeo, are saying, what is different with JCPOA and Obama administration? Why we are kind of giving up with same like a situation that we kind of really oppose. So that is kind of like problem that they are facing. So the dispute is really about sequencing, who moved first and how each step is verified. So the realistic solution is synchronized sequence. For example, on day one, both sides could announce the MOU and extend the ceasefire. Iran could begin mine clearing and allow monitored transit through Hormuz. In response, the U.S. could begin easing parts of the maritime blockade and issue limited waiver for oil export. Then in the next phase, Iran could accept IAEA supervised uranium dilution or sealing, while the U.S. authorized limited access of frozen funds through monitoring account. So, I mean, this would not be a grand peace treaty. It would be a managed de-escalation mechanism. So if I know Trump administration doesn't want Trump administration is kind of following the path of the Bush administration, like zero enrichment and pure coercion. So they want Iran to give up certain thing as a precondition, and then the negotiation could happen. But like for Iran side, no, it's kind of like no go. It's a red line, because the trust is not yet established between the two. So Iran really want a phase manner. So the problem is the sequencing, how this both sides kind of like give up and kind of step back and let this like phase manner actually implement it through this negotiation process. If it's not, because both sides, their level of trustship is very low, so it is very difficult for them to actually agree in their actual deal. So, I mean, it's all about sequencing, but the politics matter. But we'll see how it goes through next couple of days.
Right. So it really does seem that the situation is quite vulnerable, even though the two sides come up with an agreement. Now, alongside, when it comes to this, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has warned that military action could resume if talks actually fail, while Iran has threatened retaliation as well. So if this MOU actually falls through, how much could tensions escalate from here on, Professor Godin?
Very much so, I'm afraid. Because now we've got these two powers, America and Iran, playing chicken. And so, as Dr. Beck just explained, they're fighting over sequencing, and mostly for domestic issues, because both Trump and Iranian leaders so far are in a difficult position domestically. Iran, because the regime is under huge pressure economically and also because of the protests in Iran, and Trump because the U.S. public opinion does not support these airstrikes at all and basically any military operations overseas. But the problem is that because both powers cannot look like they're losing, because they will look even weaker than they are, so therefore it is also difficult for them to de-escalate. And so as a result, it forces both of them somehow first to keep looking like they're attacking and not defending. And so therefore what I am concerned with is that Trump, with keeping bombing Iran the way he is, one day he could cross this line that will make it difficult and almost impossible for Iranian leaders to sign any kind of agreement. What I'm concerned with is the Trump administration pushing it too far and making it impossible for Iran to accept any kind of deal, regardless of the sequencing they will be agreeing upon, etc., etc. What I'm concerned with is the lack of patience, the lack of leadership in America right now.
Right. So even if both sides doesn't really want a wider war, the risk of escalation still remain to be real at this point. Meanwhile, reports actually suggest that the United Arab Emirates played a much larger role in the conflict than previously known. Dr. Beck, could you explain for us, how could that shape the post-war balance of power in the Middle East and Iran's ties with Gulf states?
Yes, the UAE, the Arab Emirates, has long pursued a dual strategy. So economically, it has remained connected to Iran through trade, shipping, and finance. Strategically, however, it has moved closer to Israel and United States, especially through the Abraham Accords and defense cooperation. So if reports of the deeper UAE involvement are accurate, Iran may conclude that Abu Dhabi has crossed from hedging into active alignment with the anti-Iran coalition. That would have several consequences. First, Iran may try to split the Gulf states. Tehran will likely distinguish between state it sees as hostile, possibly the UAE and Bahrain, and state it sees as more useful mediators, such as Qatar and Oman. So secondly, the UAE may emerge as a strong security actor, but also a more exposed one. So Abu Dhabi could gain influence with Washington and Israel, but it may also become a higher priority target for Iran retaliation, cyber attack, proxy pressures, or maritime disruption. Third, post-war reconstruction and investment politics will become complicated. So if Gulf states are asked to fund Iran's post-war reconstruction or regional investment fund, Iran may accept money from some Gulf states while rejecting the political legitimacy of others. So the UAE role could therefore shape who gets influence in post-war Iran and who remains outside their trust circle. So the UAE role may strengthen its short-term strategic position, but it also raises its exposure. So the post-war Middle East may not be simply divided between Iran and U.S. Israel camp. It may be divided among Gulf states themselves as well, because as we see in OPEC, there was the division have been shown from UAE and Saudi Arabia as well. So those kind of like dynamic change has to be really have a legacies after this like warfare. So it's not like anti-Iran, anti-US. That's kind of like dichotomy. The structure. It will be more like more variety and dynamic will gonna occur with it, not only between the Iran, Israel, and United States and all other like alliances group, but also within Gulf state there will be a more the dynamics will be formed after this war, and the realignment process will be more like complicated than what we have expected.
Right, so the impact would be bigger than many have been expecting. Now, as for South Korea, then, another statement from Pete Hegseth. He recently said the era of America subsidizing the defense of wealthy allies is over. Professor Godang, do you think that it signs that the Trump administration will push allies like us, South Korea, to take greater responsibility for defense?
Oh, certainly. The way I see it, the Trump administration wants their allies. Somehow, what the Trump administration wants, they want to have their cake and eat it. On the one hand, they want their allies in Europe or in East Asia, just like South Korea, to subsidize their own defense. But on the other hand, they expect South Korea and Europe to back all of these operations that the U.S. is launching all over the world right now. So, like in Iran these days, maybe in Cuba tomorrow. So the Trump administration they expect to keep leading operations while others funding them, which of course cannot work in any in the real world. And so what we see happening right now is U.S. allies like South Korea, like Japan, like Western Europe, subsidizing more and more their own defense. So to this extent, P-Texas is definitely right. But as they do, they can be expected to shift further and further away from America. The position of America is getting weaker in the world because America is not the trustworthy ally that it used to be until very recently, unfortunately.
So this might be about more than just the Middle East. It could also signal how Washington plans to deal with its allies going forward, and we'll have to keep close attention to that. But as for now, we'll have to end our discussion right here. Thank you so much for your insights tonight, Professor Godin.
Thanks a lot.
And of course, Dr. Beck, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.